Tonight, Justice League wraps up its first arc faster than the Flash can blink. We find out just why Western comics might not be selling so well anymore. And a flaming zombie Confederate ghost shows up. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 26 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and hey, it's a fifth week. It is a fifth week in the sixth month of the New 52, and DC, they heard me whining and complaining and saying, hey, DC, why is it you put out 16 or 15 comics instead of 13? Why can't you make some of my weeks later? And they said, don't worry, we got you. And they decided to put out just 3 comics this week. Literally just 3. So I now don't have enough to fill up an entire episode. And if you remember the last time we had a fifth week, I asked for help from the fine gentleman at Comics from the Multiverse to help fill up that stack. And, well, I've learned my lesson. Never going to do that again. So how do I fill up this extra space? And I will tell you just as soon as I tell you the normal comic books coming out. So what actually came out this February 29th, 2012 was Justice League number 6, Legion Secret Origin number 5, and The Shade number 5. That's not going to take me more than half an hour, hopefully. So yeah, what am I going to do beyond that? Well, you see, a bunch of series in the New 52 had backup stories. For those of you not too entrenched in comics, there is a main story for each of these comic books, and then occasionally you will get what's known as a backup story. Occasionally, they're interconnected to whatever the main story is, but usually it's just a completely separate story that is a lot shorter and has no bearing on the main comic. And I have been skipping these religiously because that's just more work for me for something that does not connect in any way. However, thinking about it, it is part of the experience of the New 52. So I decided that on fifth weeks, I'm going to go back and let you know all of the backup stories that I have been skipping. For this particular one, that includes backup stories from Action Comics, Detective Comics, All-Star Western, and Men of War, I believe, were the primary focuses. So we will be looking at all those. But first, I'm going to get into the main comics. I will come back with this sort of interstitial thing after we're done the third one. But let's just jump right into this week's comics with the finale of the first volume of Justice League. Justice League number 6, written by Geoff Johns, art by Jim Lee. We left off last issue with Batman going to Apocalypse/Hell in order to find Superman, who is taken prisoner, and the rest of the Justice League coming up with some sort of game plan to take on Darkseid. This issue picks up with a family. A man named David Graves is narrating, saying how he thought for sure he was going to die and it was the end of the world. But then he looked up and he saw the Justice League all fighting against Darkseid, and he saw hope in the future and tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. And then he stops narrating and everyone else just handles it. So we see that Wonder Woman and pretty much everybody is taking on the fight. They're all doing a pretty good job. Wonder Woman gets the lasso around Darkseid and asks, hey, why are you here at all? And Darkseid says, for her, and then rips off the lasso, punches a couple people, and that's the end of that fight. So that's really the only reason we get as for why Darkseid's here. And we cut over to Batman in Apocalypse. He's making his way through. He's hearing some people talk about, the parademons couldn't handle his flesh, but it will be my pleasure to cut it over and over again. And as he looks on, he sees Superman being tortured by, I think they do give them names of Desaad and Steppenwolf from the Justice League movie fame. And he ain't looking so hot. So then we cut back to the fight. And again, Wonder Woman decides to take the initiative. And she's like, Darkseid, this planet doesn't belong to you. It belongs to no one and everyone. And then she stabs Darkseid with her sword in one of his eyes. And I guess that was the game plan. So she's like, all right, one down. And then Aquaman comes in with his trident, stabs out the other eye. And he's like, cool, we did it. We blinded him. Is he down? And they look at him and he's still standing. So they're like, okay, how are we supposed to beat this guy for real, though? And Cyborg he's has some loose connection with the mother boxes. He's able to see Batman on the other side of the portal. He like has a vision of that, and he's just trying to interface with the mother boxes. And he says ping, which is of course the sound the mother boxes make. And when he does so, a bunch of those portals open up and start like sucking back in the parademons and Darkseid himself. And Desaad and Steppenwolf get distracted for a second, realizing like, oh hey, these portals are opening back up. Something's happening. And Superman takes the momentary distraction, I believe, in order to knock them away. The art's not super clear on that. Batman grabs him, and apparently Superman was being pumped with visions of what Darkseid has been doing across the multiverse, and he's super evil, guys. And then we cut back to Earth, and Darkseid is again about to like crush the head of, I think, Wonder Woman. And Batman tells him like, hey, look, we need you. We need Superman. And Superman goes ahead and like attacks Darkseid out of one portal and almost into another. And as Darkseid's about to be like sucked in and pushed back into the portal, Darkseid grabs Superman, says how he's coming with me. Everybody grabs Superman, trying to get him away from Darkseid grip. And Batman tells Cyborg, hey, look, whatever you've been doing, we just need you to do it better. And Cyborg goes, I can't. And Batman says, you can. And then he does. And he ends up sucking Darkseid back through the portal, and he screams out how he will return. And then there's just this panel, this full page that's all white, and the Justice League is standing victorious. And they look around and they're like, hey, we did it. All the parademons and Darkseid in them are gone. And Cyborg makes sure to comment that whatever he did ended up frying all their mother boxes, so they won't be back for a very long time, which is really convenient. But then the League realizes that they're being watched by civilians all around, and they think they're about to be chewed out because, again, superheroes are not well liked in this universe. But instead, everyone starts cheering, and we get more of David Graves' narration saying how, oh, they're the world's greatest superheroes, and they're even more than that, though. They're gods among men. So we get in front of the Capitol building. The president or whatever is basically giving them awards for all their bravery and whatever. Meanwhile, they're talking to themselves this entire time, saying like, hey, he keeps calling us a team and like friends, but we're not, and we all kind of dislike each other a lot. And Batman says, yeah, you're right. We all really do kind of like work solo and don't want to work with each other. But maybe we should anyway, because it'll be really convenient for people to actually like us. Like, we can actually get a lot more done that way. And everyone else is like, yeah, that sounds like a good reason to make a super team. And we see that Cyborg's dad finally showed up to getting a Congressional Medal of Honor, which I guess he was going to show up to anything, he may as well have. And then as apparently there's some threat going on right in the middle of this, and the president tells him and says, like, oh, I'm sorry, but we've got trouble, and we're going to need your team again. And Flash is like, Mr. President, we have a name. And he's like, you do? And Green Lantern's like, we do. And he's like, yep, you can call us the Super 7. Ha ha ha. Played for laughs. But then we see the person who may have actually named them was David Graves, who his whole narration was actually just the epilogue to his book, Justice League, Gods Among Men. So, yeah, there's that. And that's how it wraps up. So, there is a short little epilogue here of London, I believe. And some guy who's got like a demonic shadow standing in a dark alley. A guy shows up saying like, you know, there's new superheroes showing up every day. They call them, he says there's new ones showing up. They call them superheroes. And this guy just says, oh, well, I guess they'll call us supervillains. And then he has some pin with like an evil skull on it, and I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it's there. So yeah, there's that. Real quick, there is a backup for this. It's just telling the story of Pandora, the woman who launched the whole Flashpoint timeline. There's a guy dead in the street. She comes up to check him out, and as she's doing so, the Phantom Stranger shows up and says, Pandora, admiring your handiwork. And so they go off into an alley to talk. And apparently Phantom Stranger has been sent by quote-unquote them, and she's lucky that it's him and not the Spectre. And Pandora basically just keeps saying, like, man, I ain't scared of them no more. Despite what they did to us, I'm not a frightened child anymore. And Phantom Stranger says, you should be scared. And she's like, they might not even be alive anymore. I feel like they would have done something. And they talk about how they're both sinners, and there's this third sinner walking the earth, but even he's smart enough not to interfere with humanity. So then Pandora gets pissed off, shoots Phantom Stranger in the head. It, of course, does nothing to him. He just sits back up. And she's like, well, stay out of my way or else I'll tell people who you really are, and you'll have more enemies for me. As for me, I'm going to get the Justice League to help me, whether they want to or not. And that's where that leaves off. Whatever. As for the backup, at least. Like, I feel like that's just setting up for the future stories, but, mention it now because I'm not going to mention it later. As for the main part of the book, it feels really rushed, and I want to say that perhaps I'm bringing in my own knowledge of Darkseid, like my own ability of what he can do, but it seemed at the end of issue 4 he just showed up. He didn't do anything, he just showed up, and it knocked them all on their asses. Issue 5 was nothing but them losing, and then all at once in this issue they just won. And they just explained that, he's not coming back for a while. Like, it just seemed like maybe this was meant to be an 8-issue thing, and then all of a sudden Geoff Johns was told, actually, we need it in 6 issues for the trade, so could you just pick it up a little bit? And if so, it's fine, but it just feels like for such a major threat to the multiverse, as Superman himself says, they beat him really easily. Like, it felt like it took about 5 minutes there. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But overall, in terms of this arc, it's good. I think that you're going to get better characterization for all the characters, Cyborg notwithstanding, from their own individual series. Cyborg got a decent amount here, but I feel like the real standouts were Batman and Green Lantern, as it is with the whole universe. And I don't think they really needed it, but regardless, I'm going to give this a 7.5 for this particular issue. I think that it's fine. I don't think it's great, but I like the arc as a whole, as a generic template boilerplate setup. I think that it's good to just, the team's together. They may not even like each other right now, but we can develop that moving forward. I'm good with that. I just think they might have wanted to pump the brakes a little bit at the end there, but hey, whatever, that's the end of the first arc of Justice League. We'll move on to the second arc next month. Legion Secret Origin number 5, written by Paul Levitz, art by Chris Batista. Left off last issue with the Legion deciding that they had to go into space and help out with the giant wormhole thing, and they thought it was too big of a deal. So Phantom Girl makes the suggestion of, let's go get Superman. And this issue basically opens up with them saying, yeah, now we can time travel. Yep, that's how it is. So they are in the time bubble, Lightning Lad, Cosmic Boy, and Saturn Girl. And they're like, oh my god, I can't believe we're going back to meet Superman. This is going to be so great. So they land and they look outside their time bubble, and there's Clark Kent just walking in his mid-teens through a forest for some reason. And then we cut back to the future, present, however you want to call it, and the security directorate, whatever you want to call it, one of them, Mycroft, like the main guy who we've been following, he's like, all right, something's happening. I think they literally broke time, so I gotta go. So he walks out, and he's going to go talk to Brand about okay, we need to deal with the Legion thing now because it's actually breaking the laws of time and space. But as he's walking down the hallway and he has these negative thoughts about like how he should have stopped Brand, and apparently there's some darkness tentacle thing that swirls around him, and he's like, you will bear your soul to me, mortal. I will use the things in your heart in order to take you over, and blah blah blah. And basically just takes over his body and is using him as his own little pawn. So then we cut back to the past. The 3 Legionnaires step out of the time bubble. They're about to go talk to Superman when these weird same black tentacle things show up. They shove them all back into the ship and basically hurl it back through time. So we go back to the year 3000, whatever, the present, I'm going to call it, and they come crashing through a portal. The entire time bubble like explodes on impact. Everyone's okay. There's no damage to any person, but the time bubble explodes. So Brainiac 5's like, my time, but what did you do? And he's like, that's not our biggest concern right now. Something did not want us reaching Superman. And Phantom Girl's like, all right, well, that's a good enough tease as any. So let's not waste any more time with this. We got to still go help with the wormhole, regardless of if we have Superman or not. And then we cut to the wormhole, and it's finally reached the point where giant warships can start coming through. So of course they do. The entire space army, I forget the name of them, is completely outflanked, and they're like, oh no, we're all going to die. But look, there's help on the horizon, and it's the Legion, as they all come flying in. And we get the introduction to Ultra Boy, which apparently has almost all the powers of Superman, but he can only use one at a time. So, whatever. And we see them fighting, and for some reason Phantom Girl is really into Ultra Boy. Like, really into him. So, we cut back to, I guess, Earth, and Mycroft is come to talk to Brand. Invisible kid, lad, boy, whatever his name is like, hey, I'm your, like, security guard right now. You can't just send me away. And he's like, it's with the security doctorate. I'm sure I'll be safe. So he sends Invisible Kid away, and he starts talking to Mycroft. Then we get this whole page that I don't even know what the purpose of is, but Brainiac is basically trying to repair the time bubble, and Invisible Kid walks in, and Brainiac's just being really condescending to him, but Invisible Kid keeps up, like he's able to hold a conversation with him. And then all of a sudden, Brainiac he does that thing where Invisible Kid says the word like synchronized, and then he just has that brain blast moment of course, asynchronous, and then he just runs out of the room shouting Phantom Girl. And that's it. That's all we get of that. So then we see more of the fight at the wormhole. They're, of course, doing fantastically, and they knock out all the ships, and they're just high-fiving everybody. Yeah, we did it! Yay, woo! And that one guy who was the Admiral's son that ended up joining the Legion instead of the Navy or whatever, he calls up his dad, and he's like, hey, glad I could help, from the Legion of Superheroes. And then we get one last page of Brand talking to Mycroft, and Mycroft is basically like, I've always been concerned about your Legion, but now they've been doing stuff that's way beyond you, and I'm here to stop them, as he turns into the big, dark, tentacle monster thing, and Brand is shocked that someone's trying to kill him, despite the fact that's been what the entire book has been. So yeah, that's that. It's okay. It's not... honestly, this felt like the most focused issue I have had so far of this. Like, it finally felt like we just settled into something and we're doing it. Notwithstanding the part where we went to see Superman. But even that kind of tied into the plot. Like, I feel like we finally have a plot here. It took to the last 2 issues of this miniseries before finally we're like, oh yeah, right. Stories have a beginning, middle, and end. We should get started on that. So I'm okay with this in terms of storytelling. Art-wise, again, fine. It really is just soured from the fact that I had to read 4 issues beforehand of the exact same thing happening like 800 times. Nothing from this beginning part really needed to be here, or at least stretched over 4 issues. I feel like the only thing you needed to be doing was explaining why we keep getting more Legionnaires. The whole thing with the security directorate, the whole thing with this wormhole in space, the whole thing with everything Brainiac has done up to this moment, None of those plots mattered. It's all just what we've gotten that right now. That's it. So why didn't we just start here? You know? And I don't even know how many Legionnaires there are. It's got to be at least a dozen so far. But you can get a dozen covered in like 2 issues if you really just focused on that and that alone. Told it from like a third-person omniscient standpoint of just like, and then so-and-so joined, and then so-and-so joined. And they each get like a page or 2 to like map out why they joined, what their own personal reasons are. Again, this is just what I want from the book, beyond whatever this is. But right now we're settled into a plot, and I'm happy with that. So for me personally, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6.5. I know that's probably brought down a lot more from the prior issues, but that's all I can really give it without feeling like I'm being too generous. So I'm looking to see if they can at least do something with the ending, but as I have always said with these Legion books, I am not holding my breath. Shade number 5, written by James Robinson, art by Javier Pulido. We left off last issue with an entire backstory to Darnell Caldecott, who is also Shade's great-grandson. And in the present day, Darnell is on his deathbed and dying of something, and Shade has come to visit. This issue picks up with not that, just a totally different thing entirely. We are introduced to a vampire, a redheaded girl named La Sangre. She lives in Barcelona, and she's currently fighting against this group of people named Los Tomadores, aka the Takers, who go around and they steal stuff, but they also like kill people, and they have been a terrible force in Barcelona. So La Sangre, despite being a vampire, is actually a hero, and in attacking these people, she is doing a good thing. And it's just a basic fight scene, a little bit of back and forth between them. But then as one of them seemingly gets the jump on La Sangre, Shade shows up and says, all right, hi, how's it going? And La Sangre says, hello, father. So more family relations here. We cut back to Australia 3 days ago, where Shade is talking to Darnell, still on his deathbed, and basically just clearing the air, where Darnell, he starts off, he explains, like, yeah, I've got leukemia, I'm dying. Also, I'm really super pissed at you because you were like, you're a villain, you're a bad guy, you left, you never showed up, blah, blah, blah. He gets all of his anger, but then he realizes, no, okay, I'm not really angry at you. You know, it's just a lot of feelings here on my deathbed. And Shade asks, okay, what's up with the looking for a vial of my blood thing? And as it turns out, Darnell is not looking for it in order to cure him or to prolong his life indefinitely or become immortal or whatever. He genuinely just wants it because he just has a few more questions about the Shade and like his life, and he just wanted those questions answered. So like one question really that he has is that someone within his company, someone within Caldecott Industries, is using the company's resources for nefarious purposes, and he believes it's a member of his own family. So that's what he's doing. He just wanted to prolong his life in order to find out who it was and bring them to justice. So we cut back to present day, which is Shade talking to La Sangre, and apparently she has a whole collection of vials of blood. Just recently she added JFK and Alfred Hitchcock to the mix. But he basically asks, all right, do you have a vial of my own blood? And she's like, yeah, I think I should. So, yeah, why not? Let's go get it. So they leave and they head back to La Sangre's place, which is in the middle of Barcelona. And it's very decked out. She's living in style. Changes with the ages because apparently she used to live back in like an old Gothic cathedral thing, but that was during the 1800s when Gothic was in style. So now she lives in a nice hipster apartment because that's the style. So she turns on the news and sees the news. It's like, oh, La Sangre killed this group of terrible people who've been terrorizing our city. So thank you, La Sangre. You are so incredible and great. And she's happy to hear the praise because, you know, she's a vampire. It's not often she gets that sort of stuff. But then they interrupt that news program to announce that the Inquisitor has returned, who is apparently the arch enemy of La Sangre, who basically anybody that he perceives as a sinner, he just kills. From murderers to rapists, to petty thieves, or even just liars. He just kills them. So, yeah, not a cool dude. But he shows up and makes an announcement that he's taken over Fashion Week in Barcelona, has, taken a bunch of models hostage, and if Lysandra doesn't show up to be killed in their place, he'll start killing them, and he already has the face of one of them cut off because she was crying too much. So Lysandra takes this personally and says, all right, I got to go fight him. Then we get a little backstory on how Lysandra came to be. It was a ship that was on its way to Africa. Shade was on board, and in the middle of the night, a bunch of pirate vampires stormed the deck, started eating people alive, and at one point they came across a newborn and started to bite into it, but Shade intervened and just took out all the vampires on board, and the vampire venom was already making its way through the baby. So he tried doing the rattlesnake bite thing. That's what I meant to say. Where he tries sucking out the venom. And theoretically it worked, but it still turned her into a vampire. She didn't die. So that was a good thing. But she did turn into a vampire and is technically undead now. And she aged up. She got to be about 15, 16 visually, but then just stopped and remained that way for the rest of her now immortal life. So then we see them making their way through the streets of Barcelona. They're talking about the Inquisitor, and she says how she has to do this alone, but Shade's I think that I could probably help because I'm, me. So she begrudgingly takes his help, and the issue ends with them storming into wherever the Inquisitor is hiding out. I like this. I think it's good, but it's just as good as all the other issues. It's not anything that's standing out, but this whole series has been pretty solid in terms of storytelling the whole way through. It's setting up a good mystery, but it also just feels very meandering. It's going to get to wherever it's getting in the long run, but we're on issue 5 now, and we've already been through an entire flashback issue, an issue where you had to fight a lizard god, an issue where you, came back from fighting Deathstroke. This is just very much of, what I guess it really does settle down on. If you are immortal, you don't have to rush for anything. You're going to get it done regardless. And I guess it's a good sign of that, where he can just take his time throughout all these issues and be like, yeah, whatever. I'll help out my daughter who's not actually my daughter. Whatever. So, obviously the Caldecott thing is the main driving force. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that's resolved or pivots into something new again. But it feels like we do finally have a thing that is going to stick around as the bigger thing, where it's somebody's using these massive resources and wealth from the Caldecott industry to do terrible things. That seems like it's the peak, but this is also a thing where a guy is living darkness. So I don't know. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the night that he took the poison out of Lysandra was actually the night that he lost his human blood. The vampire poison turned it into just complete darkness. So that might come up. But yeah, it's good. It's just as solid as it has been. Javier Pulido, very good with the art. I think is it really that much to say that I prefer Darwin Cook more? It's Darwin Cook art. Come on. It does fit the style, though. I will say that. Whereas this is no longer in the sort of 50s, 40s era. This fits the more modern style more. And I do think it does a very good job at it. My only complaint is that Inquisitor, in the brief instances we're seeing him here, is the opposite of terrifying. He's just the Monty Python Spanish Inquisition costume with an extra mask on top. He's scary because he cut off a guy's face, but he looks kind of dumb. So that's my only critique there. Everything else, perfectly fine. I would go ahead and give this a 7 flat. I was thinking 7.5, but honestly, I feel like it's just kind of its own little side story right now, when we're just yeah, he has to go meet his vampire daughter, whatever. We'll get back to the Caldecott stuff eventually, which, okay, I guess. If it's fun, it's fun, and it seems like it will be, but this issue right now is just setting up whatever the next issue is going to be. So yeah, 7 for this one. Definitely looking forward to seeing how we get back on track, though. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics February 29th of 2012. But of course, can't have a show with just 3 comics, so let's get into the backup issues and other things as well, because in between the time I started the show to now, I decided, you know what? My trade of Batwoman came along with Batwoman number 0, which theoretically should inform my reading of Batwoman up to that point. Was it a part of the New 52? No, but hey, I'll give it a read through because why not? Additionally, after that, we will get into the normal backups, which include a backup from Detective Comics called Russian Roulette, a series of backups from Action Comics called Hearts of Steel, Baby Steps, and Last Day. We have a couple backups from All-Star Western, including a 2-parter about El Diablo, not the one from Suicide Squad apparently, and a 3-parter about the Barbary Ghost, an original character. And in Men of War, the most consistent backup having comic, we have a 3-parter called Human Shields, following some Navy SEALs, Frozen, a 1-parter, Knife Fight, a 1-parter, and A Last Full Measure, a 1-parter about the Gettysburg battle with flaming Nazi ghosts. I suggest you stick around for that one. Out of all of them, that one I really like. So I'm going to be taking breaks in between some of these, and some of these I'm just going to be doing as stretches because they can't fill their own thing. It's going to be a mess, but whatever. Here we go. Batwoman number 0, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Hayden Blackman, art by J.H. Williams III and Amy Reeder. Now, this is not technically in the New 52. This was released about a year beforehand, maybe close to a couple of months, honestly, but it is set in the previous continuity. However, it is the basis for Batwoman in this book. And while not really crucial knowledge, it is a good catch-up on just setting up the whole series as a whole. So, this issue is basically broken up into 2 parts, literally a top half and a bottom half, and the entire thing is told from Batman's perspective of he is staking out Batwoman and Kate Kane and is trying to prove that they are the same person before he approaches her with some sort of deal or what have you. So the top half is entirely just one night, night number 7, that he is following Kate, and following Batwoman, and Batwoman is making a attack on a meeting of the Religion of Crime, led by an acolyte named Sister Shard, who has a bionic arm, and it's basically just 15 straight pages of her beating them up, and Batman taking notes, being like, all right, she moves well, she's got some good fighting styles. I only see like 2 or 3 in there, though. Definitely some military training, so she was, that proves my point more of Kate Kane, because Kate was kicked out of West Point for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and her father is still a colonel. We see as she is being attacked by a big hulking brute, she ends up breaking his leg, and Batman's like, all right, good, not how I would have done it. And then Sister Shard shows up and starts to attack Kate, gets a stranglehold with the bionic arm, but then Kate takes some mild explosives, puts them on the arm, and the arm just explodes out. And as a boat that they were moving a sarcophagus on, because shore, starts getting away, Kate is attacked one last time by a man with a knife. She gets a nice kick on them, and as she is staring out at the boat, making its way too far away, she gets upset, gets angry. The police start showing up, and she flees the scene. And at that point, Batman says he's pretty sure that Kate is Batwoman. The other half of the story is him following Kate throughout multiple weeks and basically just piecing together stuff about her personal life. So day number 4, she goes to a grave that she's visited pretty much every day for the entire week, and we get the backstory on her mother and sister were both killed in front of her while she was in the room, and somehow miraculously she got out, but it gives her the same sort of motive that Batman has. For an entire week at day 17, she's been kept up in the Kane building, which I guess is where she lives. Her father goes and visits her, but is kicked out pretty much immediately afterwards. So Batman suspects some falling out happened between them. He goes through a lot of disguises in this. He's disguised as a homeless man, and as Colonel Kane passes by, he does put money in Bruce's cup, so he can't be all that bad, according to Batman. He follows day 21, Kate out to a club, and she's able to cut loose, just let herself be free, something that Batman could never do. He's almost a little bit jealous of that. She goes out of the club before midnight with a girl, and they start getting a little bit hot and heavy, but as Batman tries to follow her, she ducks into a dark alley and seemingly loses her. Then we see day 23, Batman's dressed up as, like, the best I can say is the dorky librarian, where he's trying to bump into Kate at a bookstore so he can get a glimpse of, like, all the books she's reading. And along with Kate is her cousin, Bet Kane, a.k.a. Flamebird, which I guess is just an open thing because Batman's 100% sure of that. And he gets a glimpse of the books, and they're all, like, occultist stuff. They all have to do with, like, exorcism and such like that. And he's like, all right, what does this have to do with being Batwoman? Is this about the religion of crime? What's up? And then we see one last disguise he puts on. He dresses up as a mugger, basically. He goes out with a baseball bat, and he finds Kate leaving a grocery store, comes up behind her, takes a swing, and Kate immediately responds and does a full-on backflip / drop kick into Bruce's head, and he is very impressed by it. But as he looks up at Kate, he sees the fire in her eyes, and that's all he really needs to confirm that she is definitely 100% Batwoman. So he runs off, and again, he's made his conclusion that she's definitely Batwoman. So now he just needs to approach her about a very serious discussion about her future using the bat symbol. So yeah, it's not crucial. By all means, it's not crucial. I think you managed to get everything that this book, this individual issue puts out within issue 1 of Batwoman. I do think it gives a little bit more credence to, okay, Batman and Batwoman don't really know each other yet. I don't think that's ever really made super apparent throughout the entire rest of the comic. Maybe eventually it'll get there, but this definitely puts in that this is the first time that they're really coming into terms with each other is in this book. I think it does set up a little bit that Batwoman's doing more of the weird side of Gotham, like the magic occultist sort of thing, rather than the kooky, crazy, colorful villains that Batman deals with. So, yeah, it's a good bit of setup, but it is nowhere near necessary. Art-wise, it has all the same beautiful layouts that the rest of Batwoman has had. Just crazy, insane. Literally splitting the page in half every time just to tell these two separate stories at once. It's really well done. So I don't fault the art in any way. Writing-wise, keeping in mind that this was written well before the New 52 was the thing, as just a thing of, hey, do you want to know who Batwoman is? Pick up this single issue. It'll tell you the basics of what you need. I think it functions well enough. I don't think that it is critical for the New 52 run. I think it's fine being on its own. The fact it's in the beginning of this trade, it's fine. It's not adding too much, but it's definitely not hindering any sort of anything either. I don't know if maybe they changed some things once this was put into this trade to remove maybe references to other continuity. As it stands now, it fits in perfectly with the New 52, so it's just not adding a whole lot to anyone who's read the rest of this book. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 7. I think it's very well done, but it's like all right, we're here, and that's about all we really need from it. We have the backup to Detective Comics number 5, named Russian Roulette, written by Tony S. Daniel, art by Szymon Kudranski. This is about a guy named Eli, and I don't think we've had any introduction to him, but regardless, we get open up on a bird's eye view down an alley of a guy getting thrown out through a door, and Eli walks up and walks in asking to play. He wants to play part of this game. Apparently, the Mad Russian is expecting him. There's also this entire voiceover going on, these narration boxes of saying, all right, Eli, he showed up on my doorstep when he was 16 years old. I checked his blood against mine. He's definitely my son, but I think he has a long way to go before he's anything even close to me. And we see that Eli's walked into this backroom poker game along with the Mad Russian, whoever that may be. Again, I don't think we've had any introduction to him before. But Eli, he's asked, all right, what do you have to buy yourself into the game? And Eli shows that he's given a collar that is made of some fine jewels or something like that he apparently just found. And the guy asks Eli, all right, Eli, what's your name? Eli what? And he's like, my last name is somewhat strange. I would rather not talk about it. And he's like, whatever, as long as you can play. So they're going through the game, and apparently throughout the entire thing, Eli is doing fantastically. They talk about, hey, Jokers are wild in this game. What do you think about the Joker? He's like, this guy's a mass murderer. I got no time for that. He's a dick. That's the long and short of it. Is he just doesn't understand what they're after. And Leon tells him, like, everybody's after the same thing: money and power, money and broads. That's it. So they continue playing the game, and Eli ends up taking the whole thing. He wipes out all the rest of them of all their money with no less than a royal flush. And as Eli's about to walk out of there, a very wealthy person, he's stopped by security and said, hey, at this table, the host is allowed a chance to get his money back. And Eli's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But then security slams his head into the table and reveals that he had literal cards up his sleeve, like he was cheating the whole time. And Leon reveals that he knew he was a cheater the whole time because those jewels that he used to buy into the game were fake. He knows this because he is the original in his safe. And as he walks over to the safe to open it, it's shown that they've been robbed. And in the place of these jewels is a tiny little cat figurine that says gotcha. And of course, at that exact moment, Catwoman comes busting in and says, yeah, you stole them from me to start with. So now call us even. But as a little fee for my troubles, I'm taking all of your extra cash here. And of course, a big fight breaks out, and Catwoman just goes nuts. Like, she is, I'm pretty sure, killing these people. Leon at least has massive gashes on his face, but I think he'll survive. And so Eli checks in. He's like, hey, so how'd I do? And he's like, oh, you did fine. Go back to your father, and I'll be sure to get you the money that you've earned here. So Eli steps out, and we see that this bird's eye view from the beginning was an actual literal bird, a mechanical bird that is being run by Hugo Strange. So when he said his last name is Strange, he meant it was strange. So Hugo's looking on, and he's like, wow, okay, you managed to think on your feet there, Eli. Maybe you are worthy of the name Strange. Perhaps I can help you find your destiny. And that's where that leaves off. Okay. Here's the thing. As a backup, it's just a one-part thing. And if it's introducing something that we're going to need in the future story, that's fine. But we didn't need it for any of the main section parts, so I'm tending to just view this as its own little standalone thing. The fact that it isn't part one of whatever is super weird to me, because it just feels like an incomplete story right now. It feels like it's just an introduction, which is fair for a backup. I'm not holding it to the same standards as a full issue, but yeah, no, it's just a story about a kid named Eli who works with Catwoman and is the son of Hugo Strange. and he's apparently good at cheating at poker. Like, it's fine. The art is fantastic. I really do like Kudranski's stuff. He has a very good style. I think I gushed about it enough during the Penguin Pain and Prejudice series, which he did the entirety of. But no, its art is fine, and the writing is okay. It's there's no issues with any sort of characterization here, primarily because these aren't characters I'm familiar with. But I'm just curious as to why it's here. Like, I'm assuming it's going to further something at some point, but it just seems like Tony S. Daniel had a really cool idea, but he couldn't flesh it out into a full story. So he's like, I've got a book, I'll just put it in the back half of that. And fair enough if that was it. It just didn't feel complete on its own. So overall, it's fine. Is it worth getting the issue itself for? No, not at all. You've got to be already invested in Detective Comics in order to justify getting this particular story. But it is a fine, told well enough story on its own. We have the backups for Action Comics, all of which have been written by writer Sholly Fisch, and they are basically all just disconnected stories that are either informing the main plot or giving backstory on Superman. So the first one we have is Hearts of Steel with art by Brad Walker, and it is going over John Henry Irons, aka Steel, before he appears in, I believe, issue number 4 of Action Comics, and it is just the backstory of what did he do between the time that he left the lab and before him showing up on that bridge, and then also slightly after that as well. So he goes through and he starts off, he's looking at his suit of armor that he made, and he's recounting how his hero in human terms was Richard Feynman, a scientist that was also cool and played the bongos, and he was an awesome guy. And Feynman served his country and the world via his scientific projects, and that's what John wanted to do. And so he made the Metal Zero in armor to protect against the possibility of alien invasion, apparently. But then Lex Luthor got involved, and he certainly does not play the bongos. So then we cut to the bridge, where Steel is now fully spec'd out in his gear, and he jumps into the fight between John Corbin inside the suit, the Metallo. So he's Metallo. I'm not going to even bury the lead on that one. And Superman, and he tells Superman, hey, I'll take care of this. You go do your thing. And he starts wailing on Corbin and saying, hey, I don't know what's gotten into you, Corbin, but I will fight you. And he's like, I am not Corbin. I am the voice. And he's like, cool. So I'm still going to get on you. And he recounts how he was named after the legendary hero John Henry. And he always hated that when he was growing up because people would make fun of him. But then he realized his parents named him that to become a hero like John Henry, to never back down from a challenge and always go up against it. So now he's going up against this machine, which he does not... The irony is not lost on him that it's John Henry versus the machine. And he's trying to fight against it. And the machine is like, you can't do anything against me. I can process 200 terabytes of data every second. You have nothing that could possibly get through my defenses. And so he's like, yeah, I know your specs. I designed you. I am literally your creator. That's why I'm going to be able to take you down for sure. And he takes a few hits from Corbin, but then he gets up and starts like straddling him and trying to like pull off the armor, which is doing nothing but cracking his own armor. And Corbin's like, if you know my specs, then you know that's not going to work. What are you doing? You can't possibly hope to defeat me. And he's like, oh, I already beat you 2 minutes ago. I was just biding my time. And he's like, what are you talking about? And apparently one of the specs in the suit is that there is a USB port that will automatically download at super high speeds everything that is put into it. It's the failsafe that Henry worked in. So he just put a virus on that and jammed it in there at the very beginning of the fight, and he just needed enough time for it to spread throughout the system. So of course the virus starts locking up, and Henry pulls out his big old sledgehammer and just knocks Corbin across the bridge. And as Corbin is laying there, he's like, all right, I'll withdraw my pawn for now, but this changes nothing. Your world is still doomed. And he starts, I believe, teleporting out. And so he's like, all right, well, first fight was successful. This city now has actual living, breathing superheroes now that we have Superman. But you know what? Maybe there's room for an extra hero. I guess I should have brought my bongos, but yeah, overall this was fine. Art is very well done. It fits in the same sort of feel as the entire rest of Action Comics. It just feels like a natural extension of it, which it technically is because it's just continuing on with the earlier part of the story. So yeah, writing-wise, again, fine. It gives a bit of personality to Steel. It tells you, okay, here's the type of man he is, here's who he likes and his growing up, how he was. Like it's just a good introduction to the character of Steel that I think would have been better placed in the issue itself, but if you're pressed for time and you're Grant Morrison, do whatever you want, I guess. So overall, thumbs up for that one. Next up, we have a backup story that showed up in Action Comics number 5 called Baby Steps, and it's basically just the story of Martha and John Kent after they got married and before they had Clark. And we see their wedding day, the I-do's, which apparently Martha's last name was Clark. I was unaware of this, and I don't know if that's a retcon, but it seems really weird to me. So, they're walking out of the church, everyone's throwing rice or whatever, and they're like, Mr. and Mrs. Kent, it's going to be just you and me for the rest of our lives. And Martha's like, oh, don't forget about the children. She's like, oh, of course, we'll have plenty of kids. And then we see a little while after that Martha's crying on the bed. It's another negative pregnancy test. They've been trying for, I think, 2 years, they said, more than 2 years. And John's like, hey, you're going to be a fantastic mother one day. It's going to happen. But how about we go see the doctor and just see what we can do to help? And they go and talk to Dr. Jonas Hausler, who's like, look, here's the deal. Neither of you are really fertile. Like, there's a chance. It's not impossible, but it's going to be really, really, really hard for you. And Martha chimes up with, well, we've been reading about the in vitro fertilization. Would that help our odds? And he's like, I mean, yes, but there's still a chance it won't take, and it will cost you thousands of dollars. And they're like, all right, better start saving. So instead, the doctor puts them on hormones just to try to help it along while they're saving, see if maybe he can, not have to worry about that. And it's been over a year that they've been on hormones and still nothing's happening. They go to a priest and he's like, I'm sorry, why did you want to talk to me? And I was like, is God punishing us? Did we do something wrong? And the priest chimes in with the mother of Samuel named Hannah, how she was tormented for her inability to have kids. And it wasn't until she hit 90 that she gave birth to Samuel, who was one of the greatest prophets. So it's not a punishment. It's just when it happens, it's going to be something fantastic. You are going to give birth to an incredible child. So that renews their faith, and they decide, okay, let's get down to it. And they really start scrimping and saving all their money, and they finally do try the in vitro. But as it turns out, again, it doesn't take, and she has a miscarriage. So they go and they start looking at adoption. And as they talk to the adoption agency lady, she's like, well, you seem like a lovely couple, but we're going to have to do like referrals and screenings and home visits and court hearings. And all in all, this is going to probably cost you more than it cost you for the in vitro fertilization. And they're just like, well, we better start saving up again. And they're driving home at night from that, and they're like, what are we going to do? How can we possibly save up that much money? And John suggests perhaps it's time they mortgage the farm. And Martha's immediately against that. It's been in their family for so long. But John's like, hey, if it's for a family with you, it's all going to be worth it. And, of course, we see that on this particular night as they're driving home, they exchange I love yous. And we see that in the sky above is a rocket ship coming hurtling down towards them. So, yeah, that was the entire backstory to John and Martha Kent, which I like. I think it's a very well-written thing. The art is pretty good throughout. There are a couple weird faces here or there, but I genuinely do think it is well-done art for what it is. It gives a lot of backstory to, okay, here's why John and Martha were just so willing to accept Clark, like 100%. Like any other parent, wouldn't they, as soon as their kids started showing superpowers, like call somebody and try to do that? It's like, no, these people wanted a kid so badly, and Clark was literally, they did flat out say at the beginning of the issue of, let's have one kid at a time. After all, they don't just drop out of the sky. Like, haha, yeah, it's very funny. But it is touching. And I do definitely enjoy the issue as a whole. So thumbs up on that. Lastly, in Action Comics number 6, we got the backup story of Last Day, written by Sholly, Fisch again, and art by, again, ChrisCross, who did the last one. This is Clark's going away to college. And in this new universe, Mom, Pa Kent died before that happened. So he's literally been in control of this farm up until the end of high school. And so a local man named Mr. Fry, I believe, they just lost their local farm. And Clark's like, look, I'm going away to college. I'm going away to university. I can't take care of this farm. You and your family need it. So please take the family farm. Mr. Fry, he's touched. He's so happy for Clark's generosity. But he gives Clark a few minutes to say goodbye and get all the memories out. And this issue is nothing but just the memories. He walks around the house and sees him growing up, having dinners with Mom, Pa, and as his superpowers start to show themselves more, he shows Ma comforting him, saying how he's not a freak, he's just gifted, he just needs to be a bit more careful. We see that his Pa and him bonding over the fact that he put a tractor on the roof of the bank after they tried to repossess it at the beginning of planting season, and he also instills some responsibility in Clark of how he can stand up for the little guy and do all that. And as Clark gets to a box of memories, he pulls out a little photo strip of him, Pete Ross, and Lana Lang. And we see down at the old swimming hole, him and Pete talking about what they want to do with their future. Clark is already into reporting. He's like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter how smart you are or how strong you are. Finding the right words is still always a challenge. And he asks Pete what he wants to do, and he's like, I was just going to be a superhero like all the people in the comics, but since I don't have powers, I guess I can't go around protecting the little guy, so I'll just have to be a millionaire or work in my dad's store. And then we cut over to Lana, who straight up knows a secret. I'm still not sure if Pete knew a secret. In fact, I'm 95% sure he doesn't, but Lana definitely does, and they're sitting up on top of the barn, just staring out at all the fields of flowers, and Lana tells him, like, hey, look, you are destined for incredible things beyond Smallville, beyond this small town. Just make sure you always come back to visit because you always have family here. And they have a cute little moment together. And then we see modern day. The two of them are there, ready to see Clark off, carry out his boxes, and drive him over to the train station. And as Pete's trying to lug some boxes, he's like, man, are you sure you're going to be able to carry all this, Clark? Clark is looking over on the wall of family photos. And Lana and Pete give him a minute. He picks up one off the wall of Mom, Pa Kent and puts it in his bag and then walks out and makes a remark to Pete that Pete thought that he wasn't able to hear that far, which is why I say I don't think he knows about the superpowers. But he tells Pete that he's not getting all weepy in here. And so they go off and Clark starts college. So there's some real issues with this one with the art. And the only reason I say that is because for the flashbacks and for the parts where, like, he's looking at something and he sees Pa Kent and himself in the younger age, I think the idea they're going for is like the sort of translucent ghost-like effect. But the way they accomplished it is by just not doing any sort of, like, heavy ink at all. Like, it's pretty much just the pencil lines and the coloring, which really doesn't work. Like, it just... they needed something there. Like, especially as Pa Kent was getting older, he's got like these wrinkles on his face, and without any sort of like shadowing or anything like that, it just does not work. The stuff with modern day Clark and Lana and Pete is fine. Not great, but fine. But all the flashbacks and all that, they really needed to do some sort of ink because it just does not come across as well. So yeah, art-wise, not a big fan. It comes down to the story itself. It's fine. It's well written. It's nothing particularly wrong. I think it's a bit weird that on this entire wall of photos of Clark and his parents, he didn't take them all. Like, he's just leaving them for the Fry family. He only took the one, which, again, weird, but I guess when you sell something as is, it may as well stay. So out of the 3 backups, I think that one's probably the weakest, but it does have some good emotional moments to it. It shows him remembering his parents because they're not around anymore. It's not something that we're really going to be able to examine that much throughout the series, I don't think. So it is an interesting look at it. So overall, that one I'm going to give more of like a middling thumb to. I don't know what you want to call that, but it's fine. But with the entirety of Sholly, Fisch writing them, they're all good. They are all very well written. Art is hit or miss throughout them, but they are solid backups the whole way through. The backup stories in All-Star Western number 2 and 3 were that of El Diablo, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jordi, Bernet. I'm just going to let the story say exactly what it is, because it's a whole text box of just his direct origin. It was said the origin of this ghostly vision was born of Indian magic, blah, blah, blah. Resurrected a comatose bank teller named Lazarus Lane, blah, blah, blah. He survived a bank robbery only to be unceremoniously struck by lightning, laid in a coma prior to his transformation into the Western vigilante known only as El Diablo. That's all you pretty much need. So he's a spirit of vengeance that was struck by lightning, and also a bank robbery, and also Indian magic. Moving on. So the story opens up. He's riding into town on a horse, and everything's super quiet. There's nobody seemingly around until he turns a corner, and zombies, straight up zombies, just start attacking him. He's thrown off his horse, and they start devouring the horse hole. Pulls out his gun and starts shooting. Some people are looking out a window saying like, "Oh, we got to go help him." And, "No, we can't. He's dug his own grave." And as he's firing off some shots, thinking like, "Okay, this is weird. Perhaps it's a curse on par with my own." Man comes down on a ladder from a rooftop saying, "Hey, get up there if you want to live." And we see that it's the sheriff of the town who basically says, "This is all an Indian curse. That's all we know. But the dead are coming back to life, and if you're bit by them, typical zombie rules apply." And they go inside of this saloon tavern. Actually, I think it's a bank now that I'm looking at it. But regardless, they go inside, and there's a small group of survivors who have an Indian man tied up on a chair. And apparently they're saying that he's the only hope of calling off this horrible thing. His name is Two Crows. And apparently the guy who cast the curse is named Black River. But the man who's tied up knows nothing about any of this. He's like, "Oh, the only way it can be stopped is for a demon to kill all of the cursed." And Lazarus Lane is like, "Okay, so that's why I'm here. All right, everybody, listen up. I can help you out, but what I need you to do is knock me unconscious and protect my body. Because when I go unconscious, El Diablo can come out to play." And they're like, "You're an idiot. We're not going to knock you unconscious while there are zombies about." And he goes over to Two Crows and he's like, "Hey, look at my eyes. What do you see?" And they're like, "Oh, shit, you got a demon in you." He's like, "Right, exactly. So go ahead and do what I said." Got it? And so after a bit of arguing and the zombies start breaking into the bank, they realize, all right, let's go ahead and try his way. And they knock him out. And shortly afterwards, El Diablo pops out, which it looks exactly like him, but in more Zorro gear. And so he pops out. Zombie horde is approaching inside the building. He starts fighting them all off with his gun and his whip. And he can feel that their master is nearby, so he yells out to show himself. And then he's shot in the chest with an arrow, which then makes the unconscious body of Lazarus Lane start bleeding. And then he's shot again in the leg with an arrow. And he's like, "Oh, you can't kill me." And then we see Black River, a guy in like a full wolf headdress and face paint and all that, shooting the arrows. And he's like, "Oh, maybe I can't kill you, but I can kill your body, which will do it." And then he just goes on this tirade of how the spirit of vengeance should be working with the Native Americans because they have all been wiped out by the white man. And he's like, "Oh, but killing innocents is never the proper cause, blah, blah, blah." And basically White River just gets the upper hand on El Diablo. And he's like, "Go back to your body, or I swear to God, I will kill you now." And he's like, "I will find you." And then he just goes back into his body, and Lazarus Lane wakes back up. And at that point, all the zombies start falling apart. The curse is lifted. And Two Crows comes in and basically gives the backstory on Black River of how he was... basically, he was a normal guy who was raised by the Sioux clan, the Sioux tribe, when they slaughtered his entire wagon train, and then they taught him in forgotten magic and turned him into a great warrior. But now he's gone crazy and is just trying to get as much magic as humanly possible. And the one guy who's all antsy about this whole situation is named Merle. He's about to shoot Two Crows, and Lazarus is like, no, don't shoot him, innocent life, blah, blah, blah. So as they go out, they see all the buzzards picking in all the dead bodies. Sheriff says that him and Merle need to start cleaning up. Merle doesn't want to, but I guess he's on parole, so he kind of has to. And he's like, well, what if I just kill you, Lazarus? Because Lazarus tells him that if he doesn't, El Diablo will come after him. And he's like, well, if you kill me, you'd be doing me a favor. And El Diablo would just pass on to someone else's body. Maybe even yours. And then we just leave it at that. This was not a good intro to El Diablo as like a concept because A, he lost, B, he's not that interesting, and C, the whole Lazarus Lane bit was also just kind of dumb. Like, this felt more like, I don't know, like chapter 3 of just like, we've already been through the big bombastic opening and the cool story that we wanted to tell, and this is just kind of a smaller thing while we're padding out until we get to the next big thing we want to tell. So I don't know why this is the thing that we're like, oh, check it out, cool new character, right? And it's like, no, though. And to be fair, I don't even think he is a new character because they specifically don't mention that it is a new character created by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti on the first page of it. So he may be a pre-existing guy, but regardless, this was not a good intro to him. Art-wise is okay. It's a little bit more stylistic than House style, but it's not great. Jordi Burnet's got... It's got something there, but I feel like the inks are what really is not working for this. They're all just a bit too heavy. It looks a bit too cartoony on almost every page, if that makes any sense. So overall, I can't really suggest checking out this one, period. Like, it's okay, but it's only just barely hitting average, and that's not great for the introduction of a brand new character. So yeah, it's a pass from me. All-Star Western number 4, 5, and 6 all had backup stories relating to each other of The Barbary Ghost, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Phil Winslade. It is a story of a young woman who becomes a character totally original, as far as I can tell, named The Barbary Ghost. So, just jumping into it, it is 1878 in San Francisco, red light district. A bunch of Chinese men. This entire book is just Chinese culture the whole way through. So a bunch of men are making their way through some housing, and they're saying how they were caught off guard by this ghostly woman, and she is dangerous, and she came out of nowhere. And one of the guys is like, psh, I don't believe in no ghosts, when of course she appears and puts a hatchet through that guy's head. So she starts pulling out some like powers, like her hand starts glowing. They pull out some guns and start trying to fire, but she unleashes some weird, like, I don't know, power? Like, it's just, she sets fire to a bunch of stuff, and it all comes from her hands. So, it never really explains how she does that. So, just some form of chemicals. Unless she is an actual ghost, but she isn't, as we find out later. But here it seems like she is. So, anyway, she's looking for a man named Bo Long, and all these men work for Bo Long, and they're not about to give up their boss. But as she starts killing them and setting fire to things, one of the guys is about to give up the location of Bo, and he gets shot in the back by another one of the men, and just everyone starts firing on her. She uses the one guy as a human shield, uses her weird hand explosive thing to bring down the roof, and seemingly everyone dies in the rubble. So she makes her way out carrying all their guns and brings it back home to her grandfather. And her grandfather tells her, like, you are playing a very dangerous game here. You need to stop. And she's like, I'm not going to stop until I kill Bo Long. And he's like, fine, whatever. Just get some rest and we'll talk about this in the morning. And then we get the whole backstory on what happened. Apparently, it was the Sen family, Tsen, that they were a member of. It was 9 of them to start with. They moved from China to America to just start a new life. But as they came to America and set up their own shop, Bo Long's group of basically just, it was a mafia. They came in saying they offered protection services and they had to pay $100 every month or else they would take the daughter of the family and put her in a brothel in order to make up the difference. And the father was not having this. He smacks the guy across the face and tells him to leave, calls him a thief, and the whole family talks for a bit, and they're like, well, maybe we should pay him because he controls the side of town. And the father's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to Bo Long as a businessman and face-to-face, and we're going to sort this thing out. So he goes, and his family's like, yeah, Dad doesn't back down from nothing, but, like, he really should have. So we cut over to Bo Long's estate, and the guy who got slapped comes up, and he's like, yeah, so he slapped me across the face, called me a thief, and I didn't want to retaliate without your direct order. And Bo Long's like, oh, he slapped you? That's practically the same as slapping me. Yeah, no, we're going to break his fingers and cut off his tongue. Let's go find this guy. And, of course, knock, knock, knock on the door. There's Wei Sen, the father, just like, hi, I'm the guy who just smacked that guy. I'd like to have a word with you. Cue the next page, he's thrown in through the window, and he was dead before he even hits the ground. His family is shocked and freaked out by this, and I guess I say, thrown through the window of their shop. And one of the sons comes out with the hatchet, and he's like, I will avenge our father. And he goes and he throws the hatchet, lands it in one of the goons' head. So then the guy who got smacked just shoots the son in the head, and now he's dead as well. And we see that over the course of this little squabble between them, 5 of these sons were murdered within 2 weeks. And in response, 8 of the goons were killed. So, of course, Bo Long feels that he has gotten the worst end of this deal and therefore has to make an example of the Sen family. So the only ones who are left are the mother, the grandfather, and the daughter. And they realize, all right, we just got to get out of town. There's a small place outside the city. Let's just pack our stuff and go. And the daughter and the grandfather head out, but the mother has to stay behind to pay some of the vendors for the shop. And on the one day where she stayed behind in order to deal with this, group of men come in. The mother stands up for herself, or at least that's what the grandfather believes in flashback. But in the end, the shop is burned down, and they return the next day when she didn't come back. See, it's been burnt down, and an old man local comes up and is just like, we heard her. I'm so sorry. She's gone. And the daughter says, all right, cool. We're going to go for revenge. Let's go. Let's go kill him. And the grandfather's like, no. We're going to plan this out, and we're going to do it right. And we see this old abandoned building that the granddaughter and the grandfather are setting up dynamite and explosives to basically, they're going to fake their death is what they got to do. The only way that they're going to be able to escape Bo and truly do something about it is if he stops looking for them, if he believes they're dead. So the next day, the daughter goes outside of Bo Long's estate and calls him a coward and a lowlife, and basically, takes away his honor. And Bo Long sends his guys out to kill her. And they give chase over to this abandoned building. And as soon as she gets inside, they set off the dynamite. And she manages to escape via, they just say, some potato sacks and some longboards. I don't know how that relates, but they somehow manage to live through it and they escape. So present day, we find out that the granddaughter knows that Bo Long has gone into hiding, and it's because of her reputation as the Barbary ghost. And the grandfather's like, look, he doesn't fear you, he fears this idea of a ghost. You're still human, please remember that. And she's like, yeah, well, he fears the ghost and I am the ghost, so therefore I'm going to go kill him. So we cut to the guy who's just been like the main goon this whole time went and talked to Bo Long, and he's like, dude, you're not supposed to follow me. This ghost chick is like out to get me, and we're only supposed to communicate via whatever means. And he's like, yeah, but I like took all these back tunnels. There's no way she followed me. And then he looks out the window and sees her standing on an opposite rooftop with a flaming arrow. And she fires the arrow in through the window. It goes through the goon's arm, and he's like, whoa, hold on, before you start screaming, there's something on the end of that arrow. Maybe it's a note. And he takes a look, and he's like, nope, it's a bomb. Sorry. And he pushes the guy out the window where he explodes. And a couple of goons are looking up. He's like, did our guy just explode in the air? How did that happen? And as they're distracted, the Barbary ghost comes up and starts slashing through all the people. Bo looks out the window, sees this, and is like, all right, we got to go. So as she gets up to the room, Bo's already long gone, but the women who were held captive in there are freed by her, and she's like, she tells him, like, okay, does anybody here know where Bo went? And one woman chimes up, like, wait a minute, are you real? Are you like a real person? He's like, yes, I'm a real person. Killed my family. He's like, oh, are you the Sen girl? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, oh, your mother's still alive. Like, she worked with us. She was captive of Bo. And she's like, my mom's still, do you know where she is? And he's like, yeah, I also know where Bo went, so I will tell you everything. And as she told her everything, apparently Bo was hopping on a train, next train out of town. So very quickly, her and her grandfather made a plan in order to deal with that. And we see her in her just normal civilian outfit, and she asks to share a seat with Bo. And Bo explains how he got this table on the train with all the white people because he's so rich and powerful. And she just basically just straight out the gate, she's like, yeah, by the way, we've met before. You killed my whole family. I have a gun underneath the table, and I'm going to shoot you. And he's like, psh, you think you can just shoot me? You'd be arrested as soon as you arrive. And he's like, yeah, probably. Bang. Shoots him in the crotch. And then she holds the gun up to his head and is like, now where's my mom? Tell me where my mom is, or I swear to God, I will shoot you in a lot more painful places. And he's like, I'm never going to tell you anything. I sold her. And those... She's going to be turning tricks with those carnival freaks. And she's like, all right, that's enough info. Bang, shoots him in the head. And then she goes out the side of the train, jumps off where the grandfather's waiting with a horse. And they both ride off to their own safety as she reminisces that the idea of the Barbary ghost is going to be more and more useful in the days to come. But now she knows her mother is alive and the journey is just beginning. I think it's a good intro for a new character. I think it does a solid job of setting it all up and doing whatever it is she wants to do. But I also feel that because we killed the character who was quite literally responsible for her entire personality, this early on, I feel like they're kind of kneecapping any sort of future stories I could tell with the character. Literally, the only thing that's left in her revenge story is getting her mother back. And then once that happens, it's just done. I don't know. It just feels, from an outside looking in, while it may be a cool character to tell a story about, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of story there left to tell. Like, you should have kept the Bo thing going a bit longer. As for the story on its own, it's fine. I give it, like, somewhat of a thumbs up. It's passable. The art is also pretty good. It's not quite house style. It's got a bit of stylism to it, but it's still pretty much just your average styled art. Just a bit more detailed in some places and a bit more of a, I want to say colorist is what's really selling it, more so than the penciler or the inker, but that's just in a couple of the more moody scenes with the fights. So, yeah, it's fine. It's nothing fantastic. I can see why they didn't continue on with this character really beyond that, but hey, it's not every character can take off, so it's good enough as it is as just a backup story. The backup for Men of War issues 1, 2, and 3 is called Human Shields, and it is quite literally just a story about normal Navy SEALs. There is no superheroics, there's nothing else. It's just a couple of guys doing Navy SEAL things. It is written by Jonathan Vankin and art by Phil Winslade. And just to keep it brief, because it is over 3 parts here, we are introduced to 2 Navy SEAls named Ice and Tracker. Of course, not their real names, but they are currently staking out a building. It is a school in, I don't think they directly say the name of the country, but it is a place that the U.S. technically is not at war with, so they are covert Navy SEALs. And they are staking out this school that has been turned into basically an ammo depot. And they're like, all right, cool, let's mark it on the map, get it to be bombed to hell by a jet fighter or a helicopter or something, and call it a day. But as they are discussing this, Ice and Tracker, along with 2 other members, Reno and Litz, I think, they don't really matter that much, they start getting shot at, and Reno gets shot. So he's stuck down on the ground. And the rest of the gang basically needs to go out and find the people who are doing the shooting, because they are a threat if a helicopter shows up for a medical evacuation for Reno. If a helicopter shows up, they're going to shoot it down. So they have to find whoever's shooting at them so that they can get the helicopter to land and save Reno's life. So Ice and Tracker go out while Litz is taking care of Reno. And we had a brief little bit here about how they got their names. Ice is called Ice because his last name is Berg, and Tracker is apparently part Native American. Also, he's just a little bit casually racist, but they just kind of go over that. And also, Ice previously worked in the Peace Corps and then switched over to the SEALs. And let's see if they have if you want to do good, it helps to have an assault rifle. That's his justification. So he's going through, and they see a building that the sniper has to be in because it's the only building that's like more than 2 stories. So they start making their way inside. They hear shots being taken, so they figure that they must be shooting at their friends. So as long as they keep on hearing shots, they know that their teammates are still alive, because why would you shoot at a dead man? So they quietly make their way up to the roof, and as they get up there, they see someone with a machine gun, and they're being fired at briefly, but then they see that the person holding the machine gun is just a kid, a young girl, and she drops the machine gun and just says help. And immediately Tracker's like, she's an armed combatant, we should be attacking her. And he's like, no, she put down the gun, she's not a threat, we have to be peaceful with her. So they go up to ask a few questions, and then a man pops up from behind her and starts shooting at them. Ice is seemingly down as Tracker takes out the actual enemy combatant. And as he goes up and checks on Ice, he's fine. He's like, hey, do you know where we can find these things? As he's talking to the girl. And the girl points to some pictures, and it's pictures of their team. Like, fully 100%, as long as a map of a bunch of the buildings that they've been reconning. And so they realize, oh, we've been being watched for quite some time now. Like, we need to, if a helicopter comes in here, it will be destroyed. So we got to go find exactly what's going on and then get the hell out of here. So they realize they're probably walking into an ambush, but at least they know it. So is it really an ambush anymore? And the girl straight up tells them, I know where it is. So she leads them back to her family home, which is just a few minutes later. They see at least 3 guys with guns, and the girl, possibly on purpose, but also possibly just not realizing what she's doing, basically points out, like, where they are, like, gives away their location. So they start getting shot at, and Ice and Tracker take out a couple hostiles, 3 guys that they noticed, but they're not sure whether or not they're clear, so they start making their way through the house, and they come across the rest of this girl's family. And they're just standing there, and Tracker's like, hey, they were housing the terrorists, so we need to take them out. And Ice is like, no, that's not, they're just civilians, we don't do that. And as they start making their way towards the stairs, the mother of the family, like, jumps in front of them to stop her. And immediately at that point, Tracker's, like, ready to go. He's got the gun on her chest. He's ready to get her out of the way. We see real quick that Reno is still not doing so hot. So Litz makes the choice to call in the helicopter. Like, either A, they found the RPG and they've taken care of it, or B, they're not, and either way, we got to deal with this. So he calls in the chopper, so they're running out of time. And we see outside the window of this building, an RPG is aimed upward at the sky as the helicopter starts its approach. So Tracker's still got the gun trained on the woman. She stands defiantly against him, and he eventually just shoves her out of the way. And as Tracker runs upstairs, Ice keeps an eye on the family downstairs. And Tracker turns the corner, and he hears a gunshot. And then Ice is like, okay, don't move. Stay where you are. I need to go check on him. Come on. And he calls up to him. And after he doesn't answer and he hears a woman screaming, he makes his way upstairs. And as he's about to come in the door, Tracker pops his head out, blood covered, mind you, and says, dude, you're not going to believe this. It's a girl. And he holds up a little baby. And as it turns out, the reason that the mom was trying to stop the soldiers from coming up is because there was a pregnant woman who was basically being held hostage by the dude with the RPG. So they didn't want the woman to die, clearly. And when he got up there, he shot the person with the gun and then just helped deliver the baby. So they're all happy to help the family out. And they realize how they've been completely scouted this whole time. And if they didn't take out all these guys, they would have all straight up died when they tried to leave. But they have, so they're like, oh, yep, well, we did it. And Reno is being carted off to safety. He'll be back in a week or less. And so they get all the buildings mapped out, and they're like, all right, these are the deposits. Navy SEALs did their job. And then we see jet planes just flying overhead, bombing the hell out of this city. And they're like, well, better not think about that. On to the next job. And that's where we leave off. Okay. I mean, it's an interesting enough little story, and I like that it doesn't shy away like too far from the fact of, there are prejudices and just, little casual racism. And even though our main character of Ice is pretty much just a saint the whole way through, and Track, of course, doesn't do anything too irredeemable, I at least like that they pointed on that, where he is just kind of a dick the whole time, and he's about to cross the edge like 3 times throughout the story. So I like that, in that it's not pretending everyone in the U.S. Army is just a saint. That being said, it still kind of is. Like, it's still just that same exact thing. I'm okay with that in a soldier story, though. Like, obviously, that's what it's going to be. It's not a whole lot of nuance, and it's just the backups as well, so whatever. That being said, art, fine. Pretty much house style, nothing that great about it. Writing-wise, also good. It sounds like they basically just picked up a bunch of things that actual Navy SEALs say and just put it into comic form, because, like, every page has at least one editor's note of, hey, here's what this jargon means. Like, here's what exfil in 10 means. Here's what an HVT means. Like, it explains it the whole way through, which makes it feel a bit more real at least. But regardless, it's fine. It's a fine backup story. I don't think it needed to be any longer. I don't think it really could have been any shorter. It just told the brief story it had, and it wrapped it up nicely. So yeah, on all accounts, it's fine. It's nothing fantastic, but it certainly isn't anything terrible either. Starting with Men of War issue 4, we got 3 backups that are all pretty much disconnected from each other and are all their own individual stories. So, first one we got here is Frozen, written by B. Clay Moore and art by Paul McCaffrey. Technically, the title here is Skull and Bots. I don't know what that entails, but yeah. It opens up with basically an Ironmonger, I guess you could call it. Just big, bulky armor being used out in the middle of a desert on some quote-unquote insurgents. And they are just firing off shots, and then all of a sudden it starts freezing up. And he's just holding a guy in his hand, and he's not doing anything with him. And apparently the guy inside the suit is non-responsive. And Colonel is watching this thing from afar, and he's like, hey, our guy's not moving, what's going on in there? And the people who are, I guess, running a lab that made this armor back in DC, they're like, well, as it turns out, it's like 140 degrees over there, and the cooling system conks out at about 110 degrees. So all in all, your guy's probably unconscious in there. Additionally, we should have a remote control system that we could just get him out of there if this happens, but we kind of had to rush this suit's development, and we can't do that. So you're on your own. So the Squire, Colonel Squires is his name, and he's like, son of a bitch. All right. And they basically just, as the robot with the guy inside is taking some shots from the insurgents, Colonel makes a plan to get in there, fire off some tethers off of a different robot entirely that's like spider-shaped, and drag it back so that they can get the guy out and get that robot back home. And basically, just skipping ahead shortly, the plan works. They get the robot, they're dragging it back, and they beat the insurgents. There's a little scene in the middle here where as they're like walking through how everything went wrong and how like they could try to dodge the blame for it, a woman walks in asking for a full report of what happened. And then we see sometime later, the woman approaches this team of 2 scientists and is like, okay, so here's the deal. I went to Up the Grapevine and I told them exactly what happened. And because the cooling system was separately funded, it was not taken into account with our budgetary restrictions. And also we got extra time and money in order to make the remote control system work. And because you're working extra weeks, we also got extra funding for that. So all in all, we got several billion more dollars to help finish this product in the next few weeks. And one of the guys is like, are you saying we got a soldier trapped in a suit in the middle of the desert and nearly got him killed, and we got our funding increased? And then the lady's like, yep, have a nice day. And that's it. I feel like the entire point of this story is just how terrible the government manages to spend its money. Like, I feel like that's it. I feel like that's all we're saying here. Art-wise, it's fine. It's house style. Maybe a little bit more flair than usual, but still pretty normal. Writing-wise, the words they're individually saying are like, whatever. I feel like it's the overall message they're trying to get across of like, yeah, no. Like, even if you screw up horribly in the military, you're probably still going to be fine. Like, I don't know if that's what they're getting for. It's a funny enough point. Like, decent enough backup story. I give it a thumbs up, but, not too enthusiastically. Next up, we have Knife Fight, written by Matt Kint and Patrick Scherberger on art. And this one, there's not really a lot of play-by-play I can give. It's a man and a woman, and they are in a knife fight. And they don't know each other. They're on separate sides of this war, but I guess they both are of the belief that the knife fight is so personal, so like right on each other, that it is equivalent to like a whole relationship unfolding over the course of them trying to kill each other. Like, it's so intimate with each other because you are trying to kill each other. It is like literally life or death. So it starts off with them scuba diving and they're trying to stab each other, and then they make their way into a sewer and they try to stab each other, and then they make their way outside this building and they try to stab each other. Then a artillery shell goes off and explodes nearby, so they make their way inside of the building and try to stab each other. They make their way up to the roof and try to stab each other, and then as they're at the roof, finally the one dude is just sitting there, like, and he just lets the woman walk up and have a seat next to him, and they realize that in a different life they could have been friends or lovers or whatever. And the woman makes it clear that he was so good that the only way I could stop him is by calling in a missile strike. So then we see the missile strike where both of them are landing. The girl manages to get up and walk away, but then we also see the guy who's underneath a bunch of rubble has his eyes opening as well. And that's more or less where it lands off. The story that we get throughout is that it is the guy supposedly planted some explosives on her ship or something like that, somewhere where she is, and she needs to get back in order to disarm them or whatever. And he did that. Like, that's just what happened. He's fresh to the war. She's a veteran. He has never killed anyone. She's killed plenty, but they're just duking it out all over these pages, and they have battling narration boxes the whole time. The guy is in blue, the girl's in yellow, and they're just analyzing each other, talking about themselves, why they're here, and it's just a back and forth the whole way through, and it's well done. It's a very well done thing. I think maybe between pages it jumps ahead a little bit too much each time. Like at one point he's just climbing out of a sewer, and then all of a sudden they're just in the middle of this town square, and then they're being blown up by artillery shell, and then they're just inside this building. I think maybe between pages it jumps just a bit too far ahead, but all in all, it's a well-told story. It's definitely more for the emotional resonance than it is actually furthering any sort of plot. But yeah, the big reveal at the end is that he didn't ever end up planting the explosives. Like, she was such a good soldier in catching him that he never actually was able to do it. And I guess that's a thing. So yeah, I like it. I like it more that it's experimental. It's doing something new in terms of the battling narration boxes, and no one even like says a word to each other, but it does get across the point that it is an intimate sort of thing. Not traditionally intimate like sexual, but like, you know, something where these people got to know each other incredibly well over this just fight. So yeah, I'm down with that. Last one for issue number 6 was A Last Full Measure, written by John Arcudi, art by Richard Corbin. And this one takes place at a Civil War reenactment, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. You got the charge of the Confederates against the Union Army, and we see, you know, some families there watching. Kids are ignoring it because, you know, it's dumb and lame. But then we see one of the Confederate soldiers, the guy portraying him, hears a voice nearby, and as he looks around trying to see who it is, his ankle is grabbed by like a zombie hand, and this ghost of an old Confederate soldier comes up and basically possesses his body, and he becomes just like a zombie ghost, whatever you want to call it, of a Confederate soldier. And we see it happens to more and more soldiers across the entire field. And as this, it's a reenactment, so it's fake, but as this charge happens with the Yankees, there's actual stabbings going on. Like, this guy puts his bayonet through a Union soldier reenactor. So yeah, that happens. And as he starts, he just starts basically grumbling like, "Oh, you Yanks, we're gonna take your blood and we're gonna do that," and it like genuinely freaks the guys out, like the Union soldiers out. So they just start running, and the Confederate soldiers are like, "Yeah, we're gonna have our victory finally after all these years." And as they start charging up the hill, they see, I believe, a Union general on a zombie horse. He's also a zombie himself, a flaming zombie horse, mind you, telling them to stand down, scallywags. And he basically tells them, like, the war's over. Like, there is no more Union or Confederacy. The war's done. You all are dead. And he's like, it's not fair. You guys got to go home. You got graves. You know what happened. We're all stuck here and nobody even remembers what we are. And the general's just like, no, like, the Alpha and the Omega, they know of your souls, and you will be judged for the terrible things you've done. And then he casts them with a fiery saber back into their graves. And we see over narration box here that in 1871, the task of removing the Confederate dead from Gettysburg began. At the end of the effort in 1873, 2,000 bodies had been transported into graveyards, but 4,700 men died in that battle. So, like, 2,500 soldiers are still dead and unaccounted for at Gettysburg, and those were their souls that were rising up and attacking. And that's it. That's just where it leaves off. Going into that, I thought it was a little bit silly of, like, zombie soldiers, but as soon as it hit that last, like, 2 pages of, like, the general casting them back into their graves on a zombie flaming horse, and then just those narration boxes saying, like, this is why this is happening. I don't know, it resonated with me emotionally. I felt the thing like, okay, yeah, no, it's like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but it's like, it just hits a little bit different, you know? It's solid in the way it does it. The art style definitely is very good for that. I will give Richard Corbin full props on that, and that they're just, even the normal people are just grotesque enough that when they make the transition into zombie, you can tell that they are, but it doesn't change too much about them. And then by the time it hits Flaming Zombie Horse, I'm all in. So, no, it's a very, very well told backup. I give that one a pretty strong thumbs up, honestly. I would love to see that. I don't know what more stories you could tell about that, but if there was more of a story that John Arcudi had in mind for it, I would be interested to see it, 100%. So, yeah, all in all, 3 fairly disconnected backups, ranging from okay to pretty good. So, probably not worth buying any of the issues for, but if you can find them just separately or independently or whatever, I would say give it a read. It's probably going to be worth the 8 pages worth of time that it's going to take to read. And that's it. For real this time. That is everything that DC has put out in the last 6 months. Everything that can be even construed as part of the New 52. Do not at me. But hey, any backup stories that happen from now on, I will be covering in 5th weeks. I might break that. I don't know. Don't hold me to it. I've been known to lie about many things. You look great today, though. That's the honest truth. So anyway, let's talk about what's coming out next week. In case you didn't hear it from last week's episode, we are switching over to a Monday release schedule. Used to be Tuesdays, but then leap years had to exist, throwing my entire plan out of whack. So hey, next Monday, which was Wednesday 10 years ago, is March 7th, 2012, and there are the number 7 issues of Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Red Lanterns, Green Arrow, Justice League International, Men of War, OMAC, Stormwatch, Hawk and Dove, Static Shock, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have the number 6 issue of Huntress that's going to be wrapping up that miniseries, but have no fear, we also have the number 1 issue of a new miniseries, Night Force, and I believe that was written by Marv Wolfman, if I remember correctly. That's going to be extra fun for me because it's one of the few series that sold so poorly that it didn't get collected into a trade. I had to get all those issues individually again. Fun stuff so far with those issues. They've always been just top quality things. So anyway, if you have any opinions on any of the comics I read today or the backup stories, any comics that I'm ever going to talk about in the future, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is at DC Comics Podcast, all one word. You can use the hashtag New52 if you want, but I'm not the police. I don't particularly care what you do. Additionally, we have a Patreon. If you would like to subscribe for as low as just $1. You can get some bonus content from a bunch of people who aren't me, because I don't believe in hiding things behind paywalls, because I am a man of the people. But I also need money to live, so please do that. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. I used to look forward to 5th weeks, at least that first 5th week, because I was able to pawn off all the hard work onto some other people. But yeah, now I'm taking on the work myself, and I really wish I could just keep pawning it off. That was nice that first time. I didn't have to do anything. Stupid me, taking on more than I can handle. But isn't that really just the mission statement of this whole show? Just taking on more than I could possibly hope to do. God. Okay, getting too deep. Going to sign off, and always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.